Hi folks and welcome back. This is just a short video on first aid, not on administering first aid, but on first aid kits. You know, it's a really important part of our gear that we take out with us. I certainly wouldn't go out on a trip or even you know, just out for the day without taking some form of first aid with me. Not that I'm accident prone, but you just never know. So I thought it'd just be useful to share with you what I take with me, what I use, what hopefully I'll never need to use, and just run through my first aid kits. I have two first aid kits that I use when I'm out in the woods. Obviously this doesn't include first aid that I have in my vehicle. I have a normal car first aid kit with various first aid items in, and I know that's always in my vehicle. And I have first aid items at home as well, so any injuries and accidents at home, then we have stuff at home to deal with it. But that's not what this video is about. This is about the first aid kits that I take with me when I'm off on trips, when I'm out in the woods, when I'm on canoe trips or whatever. These are my two options, so I'll take one or the other of these depending on what it is I'm doing. I'm going to start with my bigger first aid kit. If you've been watching for a while, you may well have seen this on previous videos. I have shown some of the contents in here before, but I have added to it since. I'm constantly upgrading this first aid kit as incidents happen on trips. You learn about what you don't have. So I've added extra things to here. It's a good kit. I've got most of the things in there I need. I'll take this on canoe trips. I'll take it on longer trips with me. And yeah, it's kind of my go-to first aid grab bag. It comes in this waterproof roll top dry bag, which is really useful just for keeping the contents dry. And I've got a range of pieces of first aid gear in here, including right in the top, first aid not for me, but for my gear. So in here, I've got a split pin. I've got needle and thread for making any repairs I might need to make to clothing. I've got a couple of safety pins, and I've got some tenacious tape, which is like an adhesive tape for repairing wet weather gear, waterproof coats, tents, anything waterproof. Sticks really well. So yeah, it made sense for me just to have first aid gear for my equipment as well in the same place. And I've just got some duct tape wrapped around the tube that this comes in, and a little bit of bicycle inner tube rubber just on the end there. So that's first aid for gear. Tucked down the side of my first aid kit, I've got two items that I hope I'll never need to use. These are for serious life-threatening injuries. I've got a trauma bandage here. This is a military trauma bandage, also known as an Israeli bandage, and it is designed for gunshot wounds in the military. It's a hemorrhage control bandage, and it's got a bar in it that you can tighten up to stem the flow of blood in a serious situation. I carry this because I'm out often by myself, and I have a knife with me, I have an axe with me, I have a saw with me, and they're all sharp tools, and accidents happen, and I'd like to think that nothing would happen ever, and I wouldn't be subjected to an injury that would be life-threatening. But I think it would be foolish to go out into the woods and not be prepared just in case something like that did happen. So I've got a bandage here. I've also got a tourniquet here, which I have primed and is all set and ready to go, and I've practiced using it. Whether I remember in an emergency, I don't know. I'm not first aid trained. I'm not a first aider. I've done some first aid, basic first aid training, as a child when I was in the Scouts, but that's it. The other thing is that I'm often out with other people, and if somebody else got injured, I would like to think I've got stuff in my first aid kit that would help somebody else as well as myself. The rest of my first aid kit is in this Rollout Organizer here. I really like this because I can clearly see what section I need. They're clear, so you can see what's in there, and it's divided up. So I've got a section on medication and various accessories and burns and all that sort of stuff is all covered in that section there. The middle is all bleeding and breaks, so if I cut myself, I could just go straight to that middle section. I know that I'm going to find in there what I need, hopefully. And I've got some other bits in the bottom here. Like I said earlier, I've modified this from the original kit, which is sold, you know, fully stocked. Some of the original things I've still got in here, but I've added to them, and I've added things that are more related to what I do. So, you know, I'm more at risk from cuts because I'm using sharp tools. I'm at risk from burns because I'm working around a fire and I'm picking up hot pots and pans. So it's those sort of things. Obviously, you know, anybody is at risk of breaks and things like that. You know, you only have to trip over a tree root, you know, and potentially you could end up breaking something. But yeah, hopefully in here I've got enough stuff that would cover me, or certainly, you know, see me by until I got help, until the emergency services got to me or whatever. So I'm going to go through each section in turn and we'll see what we got. I'm going to start with this top pocket here, and in here, first thing out is my Swiss card. These things are brilliant. This is made by Victorinox, who make the Swiss Army knife, and I've got a small pair of scissors in there, and I've got, where are they? Here. I've got tweezers. These two are absolutely the most useful thing in that Swiss card from my point of view. I can use the scissors for cutting up plasters or cutting clothing away if I need to, and tweezers are not only useful for putting out splinters, but they are excellent for removing debris out of your eyes. It's also got a small, very sharp knife, which is useful to have in a first aid kit, and it's got a pen, so you can make notes on you know, any medication that's been administered, or, you know, just timings. Very useful to have in your first aid kit. I've got some burn gel here. You just apply this to your skin if you burn yourself, and it has an instant sort of cooling effect, and it minimises damage to your skin from burns. I've got 3 of those in there. I've got a resuscitation aid, one of those mouth-to-mouth resuscitation aids. I've never used it, hopefully I'll never need to. That is in there just in case. I've got a tick card. I've only ever had a tick once, and that was on my my trip to Scotland last year. Yeah, 1 or 2 of the lads found ticks on them, and we all checked ourselves, and I found one on the back of my leg, and I to be honest, I'd never have spotted it. It was tiny, and one of the lads had one of these tick cards. In the past I've had those little tick twister things, and this was so good at getting them out that I straight away went and bought one. You just tease the card underneath the tick, so those prongs go one either side, and then you just gently lift it away, and it should just come away with the legs and everything all intact. Yeah, good bit of kit. I've got a thermometer here, just a simple, basic, reusable thermometer that came with the first aid kit when I bought it. There's a little scale that you can read off what the temperature is. I've got some antibacterial wipes, alcohol-free antibac wipes. I've got some Compeed blister plasters. These things are brilliant. They create a second skin over your blister. You just put it on over the top, and it helps the blister to heal and just cushions it. Then I've got some medication. I've got paracetamol tablets, 500mg caplets for pain relief, and I've got Nurofen or ibuprofen are my go-to pain relief tablets. I don't try not to take tablets often, you know, only if pain is really bad, but you know, they can be super useful and for bringing down inflammation. I've got got another burn gel, different brand but same stuff. I've got some cracked skin salve, you know, walking, hiking, feet dry out, taking care of your feet is always good. And I've got some foot cream as well. They just live in there for a bit of foot care. I've got a packet of hand warmers. Cold injuries is another risk for me. You know, I'm out all year round, even in the winter. So having a means to warm up, or even just to deal with first aid. You know, if you're trying to do that with really cold hands, it can be really hard to, you know, manipulate a pair of scissors, for example, with your hands freezing cold. It can be really hard to just even make them work. So being able to warm your hands up first is a good idea. So I always have a couple of them in my first aid kit. And I've got a space blanket. Again, if you, you know, for injuries, maybe not so much to myself, but if I come across somebody else that's injured and, you know, you're going to be sat still for some time, perhaps in the winter or on a mountainside or something like that. You know, just a means to wrap up, keep a bit of weather off and keep some of that heat trapped in. So one of those Mylar foil blankets is in there as well. This middle section is all to do with cuts and bleeding and broken bones. So in here I have a roll of adhesive tape. I use this for fastening bandages and dressings. I have another roll of tape that just sits here between those two sections, along with some safety pins, which I also use for fastening dressings. Then I've got a couple of first aid dressings here. I've got a medium-sized dressing and an ambulance dressing, a slightly bigger one, again just for binding up wounds. And then I have various dressings and plasters. Yeah, I have an assortment of plasters or band-aids in here. Some of them these sort of pre-shaped, individually wrapped plasters. Some of them are more like this type here, which actually I prefer. I prefer just to be able to cut a plaster to size, depending on you know, what I need. Sometimes I just find that easier. I also find that they tend to stick a bit better than the individually wrapped ones. Next up, I've got a load of gauze swabs and dressings. These are the non-sticky type, various sizes of, like wound pads, which I can then, you know, fasten in place with a bandage or just with tape. I've got a big old triangular bandage here, so I can make a splint for a broken arm or whatever. I've got some antiseptic cream, just to make sure those cuts and grazes don't go septic and manky. I've got some super glue here, which is a bit of a weird thing to have in a first aid kit, but it's really useful for closing up cuts. If you've got a cut that won't stop bleeding and won't close up, you can seal it with super glue and actually literally glue your skin back together again with super glue. So I keep a tube of that in there as well. Also on cuts, I keep some Hemostatic Granules. This is a clotting agent, and yeah, you sprinkle it onto a nasty cut or a nasty wound, and it encourages blood clotting, and that, you know, therefore healing, you know, encourages that wound to stop bleeding and scab. So I've got some of that. They're same stuff, just two different brands, Wound Seal and Celox. And then finally in here, I've got a couple of sanitary tampons. These are really useful to have in your first aid kit. They hardly take up any room, and they're great for stemming the flow of blood. They're highly absorbent, and you can use them for applying pressure to a wound that won't stop bleeding. You know, put that over the wound, bind it up nice and tight, it applies pressure and it stops that bleeding. Really, really good to have in your first aid kit. Then in the little pocket at the bottom there, I've got a pair of vinyl gloves. I've got the original little booklet that came with the first aid kit when I bought it, and it's just got some useful information on using some of the bandages and dressings and things that are in there. I've got the first aid kit for my Thermarest. I've got some insect repellent wipes. I've got some more antibacterial wipes, and a little reminder of COVID. I've got a face mask that just lives in there as well. It's by no means a full and complete kit. Going through it to show you just now, I've spotted a couple of things that are missing that are normally in there. Antihistamine tablets I normally carry, and they're missing, so I must have used them up and not replaced them. So it's a good little reminder for me to grab some and put them back in my first aid kit. And the other thing I often carry is some of this elastic tape. It's really good for pulled muscles, you know, twisted ankles, anything like that. It's super stretchy and it kind of sticks to itself. A bit like a bandage. It comes on a roll like this. Really good stuff if you know, strain your ankle or whatever, hurt your knee or whatever while you're out walking. This can be a good little saviour. So that's my big kit. That's the one I take on my big trips. You know, when I've got space to pack it, canoe trips, things like that, longer camps with other people. But let's have a look at my more compact, lightweight backpacking version. So this is basically a scaled down pocket-sized version of what I showed you in my bigger first aid kit for those times when I don't want to carry something quite so big. I have similar items in here, just not as much. So I've got one of those ambulance dressings, a first aid dressing. I've got a wound pad. I've got plasters, mostly just the kind that you cut yourself because I prefer them. You know, these type on the reel. And I've also got in there some blood clotter. So that is it for sort of bleeding, really. I've got a mylar foil blanket for emergency use. Most of the time when I'm going to be using this will be for backpacking. So I've got some Compeed blister dressings in there, blister plasters, a couple of those. I've got some Nurofen for pain relief. I've got one pouch of burn gel. I've got one of those Swiss cards, and I've got tick twisters. These are the cheaper versions of the card that I showed you. They're not quite as effective, but they do the job. And I use these for Maggie as well as for me. Depending on what I'm doing, I may take one of these bigger trauma bandages with me, even if I'm taking my small first aid kit. It doesn't have to pack in the first aid, bag itself. I can pack that separately, just in in the pocket of a rucksack. It doesn't take up a lot of space, but it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm backpacking, for example, and I'm not even taking a knife, I probably won't bother with the trauma dressing. It depends on what I'm doing. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope you've found it useful. First aid isn't the most exciting bit of kit, really, when we're thinking about packing for a trip, but it's certainly one of the most important, I think. Not having first aid items could ruin your trip very, very quickly. It could just be a small cut, and you could deal with it there and then in the field if you have the right gear with you to do it. If you haven't got any means to stop the flow of blood, then you're going to be in a bit of trouble, and that's probably going to be the end of your trip and the end of your fun. So yeah, always take a good first aid kit with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. And stupidly, I didn't bring my first aid kit, so I haven't even got a plaster to put on it.